Among history's most remarkable figures, two men stand whose vision and daring reshaped the face of the modern world: Isambard Kingdom Brunel and Edward Smith. Let us begin with the first, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Isambard Kingdom Brunel was born on the 9th of April in the year 1806 in Portsmouth, Hampshire, England. What turned a gifted boy raised in a household of innovation into one of the boldest engineers in British history? How did this young mind, shaped by his father's genius and his mother's strength, rise to transform the very landscapes of Britain, and later the oceans themselves? What dreams began in Portsmouth that would one day stretch across continents? Please watch my full video until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Born to the celebrated French engineer Marc Isambard Brunel and Sophia Kingdom, Isambard's childhood was anything but ordinary. His father, already acclaimed for his inventive mind, became both mentor and teacher. Even as a toddler, Brunel was encouraged to draw architectural shapes, dissect mechanical puzzles, and examine buildings for flaws. By the age of 4, he was being trained in drawing and spatial observation. At 8, he had mastered Euclidean geometry and spoken French, and could already explain basic engineering ideas to adults with confidence. His household was filled with constant discussions of mathematics, mechanics, and invention. In 1808, the family relocated to London, where Brunel's real educational journey began, preparing him for a life that would span railways, tunnels, bridges, and ships. From these earliest years, Isambard's world was one of ideas, and he was determined to turn them into reality. As the Brunel family settled in London, young Isambard's future began taking shape through a unique blend of British resolve and French brilliance. His father, determined to provide his son with the same classical education he had received in France, sent Isambard abroad at the age of 14. There, the young boy entered a new world, one that would refine his talents and sharpen his genius. Brunel began his studies at the University of Caen, before transferring to the prestigious Lycée Henry IV in Paris. Immersed in the rigorous French academic system, he mastered advanced mathematics and engineering principles while excelling in drawing and design. He was an exceptional student, fluent in French, methodical in his work, and admired for his quick understanding of complex problems. At just 15, Brunel's path was interrupted when his father was imprisoned in Britain for unpaid debts. Desperate and under threat of being lost to a foreign power, Marc Brunel was saved only when the British government intervened to prevent him from taking his talents to Russia. Isambard, meanwhile, was completing his studies and preparing for further academic distinction, hoping to enter the elite engineering school École Polytechnique. But as a foreigner, he was rejected. Instead, Brunel apprenticed under Abraham Louis Breguet, a master clockmaker and famed inventor. This rare mentorship deeply influenced his sense of precision and innovation. By the end of 1822, Brunel had returned to England, not just as a student, but as a young man ready to build the impossible. When Isambard Kingdom Brunel returned to England in the year 1822, he carried with him not just a refined education, but a rare sense of discipline and invention. Fresh from his apprenticeship with the celebrated French horologist Abraham Louis Breguet, Brunel brought back an appreciation for precision mechanics and bold design. These influences would soon find their outlet in one of the most dangerous and ambitious engineering projects of the century, the Thames Tunnel. Working as an assistant engineer to his father, Marc Brunel, Isambard joined the team constructing the first tunnel ever attempted beneath a navigable river. Located between Rotherhithe and Wapping in London, The project required men to burrow under the unstable riverbed of the Thames. The dangers were enormous: shifting sediment, collapsing walls, and deadly floods. Mark Brunel's invention of the tunneling shield was revolutionary, a metal frame that protected workers from cave-ins, and Isambard was at the heart of its operation. He quickly gained a reputation as brave, hands-on, and unafraid to enter the hazardous tunnel himself. But in 1828, disaster struck. A catastrophic flood tore through the tunnel, killing several workers and leaving Isambard seriously injured. He barely escaped with his life and spent 6 months recovering from the ordeal. Yet even during convalescence, Brunel's mind remained restless. It was during this period that he began sketching plans for a bridge across the Avon Gorge in Bristol, a design that would later evolve into the Clifton Suspension Bridge. From the depths of the Thames to the heights of future bridges, Isambard was already looking ahead, determined to turn setbacks into stepping stones. In the early 1820s, few projects in Britain stirred as much curiosity and concern as the Thames Tunnel. For Isambard Kingdom Brunel, this was more than an engineering assignment. It was a bold mission that would test every ounce of his skill, courage, and resolve. Alongside his father Mark Brunel, he took part in constructing the first tunnel ever attempted beneath a navigable river. The challenge: dig beneath the muddy and unstable bed of the River Thames without drowning the entire workforce. The project employed a groundbreaking tunneling shield invented by Mark Brunel, a device that protected workers from deadly cave-ins by pushing forward in sections. Young Isambard was directly involved in day-to-day operations, often descending into the dark, gas-lit tunnel to inspect progress and address hazards. The work was slow, the danger constant. Workers endured floods, gas leaks, and sudden collapses, all while chiseling through soft, soaked clay. Then came the worst. In March of 1828, the river broke through. Water surged into the tunnel with terrifying force, sweeping away workers and nearly claiming Isambard's life. He was dragged unconscious from the flood and suffered serious injuries, including a damaged lung. Recovery took 6 months, a long pause for someone so eager to build. Yet even while confined to bed, his mind stayed active. During this time, Brunel began drafting plans for what would become one of his most iconic achievements, a grand suspension bridge in Bristol. From beneath the river to above the gorge, the young engineer's ambition had not been washed away, it had only grown stronger. After recovering from his injuries, Isambard Kingdom Brunel emerged more determined than ever. Though he would no longer continue work on the Thames Tunnel, the vision he nurtured during his convalescence, a bridge spanning the dramatic Avon Gorge in Bristol, was about to enter public life. The Clifton Suspension Bridge, as it would later be known, became the defining project of his early career. In 1831, Brunel submitted several designs for the bridge to a competition organized to find the best solution. Although the great engineer Thomas Telford initially rejected all entries, public outcry forced a second competition. This time, Brunel's elegant and daring design, featuring twin towers and a span that would make it the longest suspension bridge in the world, won the judges' approval. He was just 24 years old. The project was ambitious and expensive. Construction began, but was quickly halted due to the Queen Square riots in Bristol, which scared off investors and dried up funding. The bridge would not be completed during Brunel's lifetime, but his involvement captured national attention. He had taken a dream and turned it into blueprints, securing his name among Britain's promising engineers. Other opportunities soon followed. In 1835, he began working on Hungerford Bridge in London and designed smaller rail and road bridges throughout the country. Brunel's reputation grew not only because of his technical genius, but because of his flair, the sense that he was designing not just for utility, but for a bold and beautiful future. The young man once buried in the Thames mud was now stepping into the light of public fame. In the early 1830s, railways were transforming Britain, and Isambard Kingdom Brunel saw their potential not just as a national network, but as a global link. In 1833, he was appointed chief engineer of the Great Western Railway, a project intended to connect London to Bristol. But for Brunel, this wasn't just about moving passengers. His dream was to allow a person to board a train in London and arrive via ship in New York, all under one seamless vision of speed, safety, and engineering brilliance. Brunel's approach to the railway was revolutionary. He personally surveyed the entire route, ensuring gentle gradients and minimal curves. But it was his decision to implement a broader track gauge, 7 feet and a quarter inch, that sparked controversy. This broad gauge system, he argued, would allow for greater speed, smoother travel, and more spacious carriages. Most British railways at the time used a narrower standard gauge, and many critics viewed his bold departure as impractical and arrogant. Despite opposition, Brunel pressed forward. The Great Western Railway soon became known for its technical excellence, with impressive stations, sweeping viaducts, and the pioneering Box Tunnel, then the longest railway tunnel in the world. Yet, as other railways expanded using standard gauge, the incompatibility posed logistical challenges. Still, Brunel believed that comfort and performance mattered more than conformity. His vision was not limited by present norms, but shaped by what he believed the future should be. The railway debate wasn't just about tracks, it was about the path of progress itself. As the Great Western Railway stretched westward, Isambard Kingdom Brunel continued to reshape the very geography of Britain. Nowhere was his ambition more visible than in the monumental Box Tunnel. Carved through solid limestone near Bath, the tunnel extended over 2 miles, the longest of its kind when completed in the year 1841. More than a feat of engineering, it was a bold statement that no obstacle, not even a mountain, would stand in the way of Brunel's railway. Constructing the Box Tunnel tested both man and machine. Hundreds of laborers, using little more than hand tools and dynamite, worked day and night to dig through difficult rock. Accidents were frequent, and the toll on workers was severe. Yet Brunel was undeterred. He famously designed the tunnel so that on his birthday, the 9th of April, the rising sun would shine directly through its entire length. Whether coincidence or calculation, it symbolized his personal connection to the work. Beyond tunnels, Brunel revolutionized railway viaducts, especially in the southwest, where deep valleys required daring spans. He made extensive use of timber and laminated wood in viaduct construction, later adapting to iron and stone as the network expanded. In Maidenhead, his brick arch bridge was the flattest and widest of its time, and it still carries trains today. Meanwhile, his stations were designed as elegant gateways to modernity. Paddington Station in London, opened in 1854, was a masterpiece, combining graceful iron arches, glass ceilings, and spacious platforms. To Brunel, every piece of the railway, from tunnel to terminus, was a chance to blend functionality with grandeur. By the mid-1840s, Isambard Kingdom Brunel's appetite for innovation remained unshaken. Even with his reputation secured, he continued to chase untested ideas, some visionary, others flawed. Among his boldest experiments was the atmospheric railway system, a method that used air pressure instead of locomotives to move trains along the tracks. It promised quieter, faster, and cleaner travel, and Brunel believed it could revolutionize rail transport. The system involved stationary engines placed every 2 miles, creating a vacuum inside a pipe laid between the rails. A piston connected to the train was pulled forward by air pressure, but the innovation required complex leather flaps to seal the vacuum pipe, and these flaps were the system's downfall. Rats chewed through the leather, water damaged the seals, and cold weather caused them to crack. Maintenance costs soared. Despite some initial success between Exeter and Newton Abbot, the atmospheric railway struggled to perform reliably. Operations ceased within a year by September of 1848, and the system was abandoned. Yet Brunel did not view this as failure, only experience. During this same period, he pursued other unconventional ventures, such as developing early gas-based engines and proposals for floating gun batteries during the Crimean War. Though not all these projects succeeded, they revealed Brunel's constant drive to explore boundaries, technical, military, or industrial. His daring came with risks, but also with lessons. The atmospheric railway may have failed, but it paved the way for future experimentation and reminded the world that progress demands courage, even when the outcome is uncertain. While Isambard Kingdom, Brunel revolutionized rail travel on land, his ambition soon turned toward the sea. He envisioned a future where passengers could travel from London to New York with one continuous ticket, first by rail, then across the Atlantic by steamship. In the early 1830s, many doubted whether a steam-powered vessel could carry enough fuel for such a long journey, but Brunel was determined to prove them wrong. In partnership with the Great Western Steamship Company, Brunel designed the SS Great Western, the longest ship in the world at the time of her launch in 1837. She was built primarily of wood but reinforced with iron bolts, and powered by paddle wheels with an additional set of sails for backup. Critics scoffed at the idea that such a ship could complete a transatlantic voyage on steam power alone. On the 8th of April in the year 1838, the Great Western departed from Avonmouth, Bristol, bound for New York. Despite a 4-day head start by a rival ship, the Sirius, Brunel's vessel, arrived just 1 day later with a third of its coal still unused. It was a stunning success. The Great Western proved that steam travel across the Atlantic was not only possible, but practical. This triumph marked the beginning of a new era in ocean travel. Between 1838 and 1846, the SS Great Western completed 64 crossings and claimed the coveted blue riband for fastest transatlantic voyage. For Brunel, the Atlantic was no longer a barrier, it was a highway waiting to be built. Buoyed by the success of the Great Western, Isambard Kingdom Brunel set his sights even higher, not just faster or farther, but fundamentally different. He had become convinced that the paddle wheel, dominant in steamship design, was outdated. Inspired by tests on the steamship Archimedes, he turned to a new idea, the screw propeller. Combined with iron hull construction, this would create a vessel unlike anything the world had seen. The result was the SS Great Britain, launched in the year 1843. At over 300 feet long, she was the largest ship afloat and the first to be made entirely of iron. Her 6-bladed propeller, a marvel of engineering, replaced paddle wheels altogether, allowing for more efficient propulsion and better maneuverability, especially in stormy seas. It was a bold departure from traditional shipbuilding. Her maiden voyage in 1845 took her across the Atlantic, making her the first iron-hulled, propeller-driven ship to complete the crossing. With sleek lines, strong construction, and a powerful engine, the SS Great Britain was not only a technological marvel, she was the first truly modern ocean-going ship. However, her early career was cut short when she ran aground in Dundrum Bay, Ireland. Though later salvaged and repurposed for service to Australia, her pioneering influence remained. Brunel had once again reshaped the limits of travel, this time on the open sea. The SS Great Britain stands today in Bristol, fully restored, a tribute to the man who believed that engineering was not about following rules, but about rewriting them for the future. For Isambard Kingdom Brunel, there were no limits, only new frontiers to conquer. After transforming railway travel and redefining transatlantic steamships, he set out to build a vessel unlike anything the world had ever seen. In the early 1850s, he began designing the SS Great Eastern, originally named the Leviathan, a ship so vast that it would not only cross oceans, but do so without stopping for fuel or supplies. Launched in the year 1858, the Great Eastern was nearly 700 feet long and could carry more than 4,000 passengers. She was fitted with both paddle wheels and a massive propeller, along with 6 masts for sails, a fusion of every propulsion method known at the time. The ship's double hull, another of Brunel's innovations, made her exceptionally safe. She was designed to sail from London to Sydney and back without refueling, a feat no other ship could imagine. But the project was plagued by technical delays, cost overruns, and intense skepticism. The public viewed her with awe, but investors were less impressed by the slow progress and spiraling expenses. Brunel, exhausted from the relentless work, watched the launch unfold as both a triumph and a burden. Though her original purpose as a passenger liner failed commercially, the Great Eastern later found new life, laying the first successful transatlantic telegraph cable, a breakthrough that would link continents by instant communication. Even in partial failure, Brunel's creation paved the way for the future. The Great Eastern was a ship ahead of her time, and so was the man who built her. Amid his many grand-scale engineering projects, Isambard Kingdom Brunel took on a very different challenge during the Crimean War, one driven not by steel or steam, but by compassion. In the year 1855, Florence Nightingale issued a public plea for help. British soldiers were dying by the thousands in unsanitary, overcrowded hospitals in Scutari. The War Office needed a solution. Brunel answered the call. Despite being immersed in the final stages of building the Great Eastern, he diverted his attention to design a fully functional, prefabricated hospital that could be shipped to the war zone and assembled quickly. The result was the Renkioi Hospital, a series of wooden and canvas wards complete with ventilation, drainage, temperature regulation, and access to sanitation. It was a radical departure from the grim field conditions common at the time. Working with Gloucester-based builder William Easy and timber suppliers at Gloucester Docks, Brunel's hospital units were constructed in just 5 months. They were shipped in pieces to the Dardanelles and assembled near Scutari in a healthier, malaria-free zone. The contrast was stunning. Of the more than 1,300 patients treated at Renkioi, fewer than 50 died, a stark difference from the horrors of traditional army hospitals. Florence Nightingale praised the magnificent huts, recognizing their life-saving impact. Brunel had applied engineering logic to humanitarian crisis, and succeeded. Though this chapter of his career is often overshadowed by ships and railways, Renkioi proved that his genius wasn't limited to iron and stone. It extended to human lives and the belief that innovation should serve the living. Behind the towering bridges, roaring engines, and ambitious steamships stood a man of complex character, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. In private, he was meticulous, intense, and deeply devoted to his work. But he also had a family life, a network of admirers, and a growing reputation that reached far beyond engineering circles. On the 5th of July in the year 1836, Brunel married Mary Elizabeth Horsley, the daughter of renowned composer William Horsley. Together they built a home in Westminster and had 3 children, including Henry Mark, who would follow in his father's engineering footsteps. Though often consumed by his projects, Brunel maintained a strong connection to his family, and Mary Elizabeth was a constant presence and support in his life. Brunel's public image grew steadily throughout the Victorian era. He became known not only as a builder of machines, but as a symbol of British ingenuity. His name was linked to progress, ambition, and the belief that technology could reshape the future. In 1830, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, a rare honor for an engineer at the time. Artists captured him standing before the massive launching chains of the Great Eastern, a visual icon of strength and industrial might. He wore a top hat, cigar clenched in his mouth, and steel confidence in his eyes. But those close to him knew he also carried the burden of perfectionism, working himself to exhaustion in pursuit of excellence. By the mid-19th century, Isambard Kingdom Brunel was more than an engineer. He was a national figure, admired, celebrated, and, perhaps, quietly overwhelmed by the legacy he was still building. In the final years of his life, Isambard Kingdom Brunel pushed forward with relentless energy, even as his health began to falter. The construction and launch of the SS Great Eastern had drained him physically and emotionally. The delays, technical failures, and public scrutiny took their toll. Though the ship eventually sailed, Brunel's body was showing signs of exhaustion. Still, he refused to slow down. During this time, he also designed the complex 3 bridges in London, an ingenious solution allowing a railway, a road, and a canal to pass over and under each other at the same location. It was completed in the year 1859, showcasing once again his ability to solve logistical puzzles with elegance and clarity. Brunel's final projects revealed the same ambition that had driven his career from the beginning. Whether building timber viaducts across Cornwall or developing innovative ship designs, he was always ahead of his time. Yet the pace at which he worked, often ignoring illness and fatigue, began to catch up with him. Colleagues noticed his declining strength, but Brunel refused to step away. His legacy was already cemented by the late 1850s. Railways, bridges, ships, and tunnels bore his mark. His belief in combining beauty with functionality changed how the world viewed engineering. He had redefined what was possible across land, water, and industry. But even as his vision stretched into the future, his body was nearing its limits. Friends and family hoped he might rest, but Brunel had one final journey ahead, not of invention, but of farewell. By the end of 1859, the man who had tunneled beneath rivers, spanned vast valleys, and bridged continents was finally nearing his own end. Isambard Kingdom, Brunel suffered a major stroke just days after witnessing the trial voyage of the SS Great Eastern, the ship he had spent years building, and which had tested the limits of his health and strength. On the 15th of September in the year 1859, Brunel passed away at the age of 53 at his home in Westminster, London. His death sent shockwaves through Britain. Newspapers mourned not only an engineer but a national icon, a man whose mind had charted new worlds. He was laid to rest in Kensal Green Cemetery, a fitting resting place for one of the greatest figures of the industrial age. Though gone, his influence only grew stronger. His bridges still stand, his tunnels still carry trains, and his ships changed the shape of maritime engineering forever. Modern engineers continue to study his methods, not only for their brilliance, but for their daring. Brunel believed failure was not shameful, refusing to try was. He taught the world that dreams, no matter how large, are worth pursuing. schools, stations, ships, and monuments across the United Kingdom now bear his name. His legacy is woven into the very structure of the nation's identity, from Paddington Station's iron arches to the graceful span of the Clifton Suspension Bridge. In 2002, more than a century later, the British public voted him the second greatest Briton of all time, just behind Winston Churchill. Isambard Kingdom Brunel's story is not just one of steel and stone. It is one of vision, courage, and an enduring legacy that reshaped the world. Let us now turn to another remarkable figure of royal descent. Edward John Smith was born on the 27th of January in the year 1850 in Hanley, Staffordshire, England, one of the 6 towns that would later form the city of Stoke-on-Trent. What shaped the young boy who would one day stand on the bridge of the world's most famous ocean liner? How did his modest beginnings lead him to a role that would place him at the center of one of history's greatest maritime tragedies? And what quiet decisions, made far from the headlines, built the reputation that defined him long before the Titanic? Edward Smith was the son of a potter. His father worked in the heart of England's ceramics industry, which dominated the region's economy during the mid-19th century. Raised in a working-class household, Edward was surrounded by industry and discipline, but not wealth or aristocratic privilege. He attended Etruria British School and showed a strong sense of responsibility from an early age. Despite limited means, his mother ensured he had a proper education, and his fascination with the sea began to take root during his teenage years. By the early 1860s, Britain's merchant fleet was booming, and tales of faraway places captured young Edward's imagination. He would eventually leave school early to pursue a life at sea, a decision that changed not only his own future, but maritime history itself. From the smoke-lined valleys of Staffordshire to the Atlantic winds that would one day define his fate, Edward Smith's journey had quietly begun. Edward Smith's entry into the world of maritime service was not marked by privilege or inherited influence, but by determination and practical skill. In the late 1860s, he began his career as an apprentice with A. Gibson & Co., a respected Liverpool-based shipping company. This hands-on training gave him experience aboard various cargo vessels, where he learned navigation, seamanship, and the discipline of life at sea. During his early voyages, Smith traveled to distant ports across South America, India, and Australia. The long, grueling journeys exposed him to shifting weather, foreign cultures, and the unpredictability of ocean travel. He adapted quickly, earning the respect of senior officers and fellow crew members alike. His calm nature, reliability, and quiet authority began to distinguish him in a profession where command presence mattered as much as technical skill. By the mid-1870s, Smith had earned his master's certificate, a qualification that marked his readiness to take command of a ship. At a time when Britain's merchant marine was expanding rapidly, his timing was ideal. The seas offered opportunity, and Smith was determined to rise. Though his beginnings were humble, Smith showed a natural ability to lead. He was methodical, clear-headed, and never rushed decisions. Those who worked with him noted a man who avoided drama, focused on duty, and remained even-tempered in storm or calm. These qualities would carry him through the next phase of his life, and eventually place him at the helm of some of the most famous ships of the era. In the year 1880, Edward Smith joined the White Star Line, a decision that would define the rest of his life. Known for its luxury liners and commitment to passenger service, the company offered ambitious officers a chance to rise quickly if they could match the expectations of elite travelers and transatlantic reliability. For Smith, it was the perfect fit. He began as fourth officer aboard the SS Celtic, one of White Star's larger steamships. From there, his competence and character were quickly recognized. Over the next 2 decades, Smith served aboard nearly every major vessel in the line's growing fleet, steadily rising through the ranks to chief officer, then to full captain. He was entrusted with command of the SS Republic, followed by other high-profile ships such as the Coptic and the Adriatic. With each voyage, he gained experience not just in seamanship, but in passenger management, transatlantic scheduling, and high-pressure decision-making. By the late 1890s, he had become a favorite among both crew and upper-class travelers, earning the affectionate nickname the Millionaire's Captain. What set Smith apart was his steady temperament. He was neither boastful nor flamboyant, but a quiet professional who inspired trust. In an age when sea travel was evolving into a display of luxury and national pride, White Star needed captains who projected confidence, discretion, and grace under pressure. Edward Smith embodied all three. His rise through the White Star ranks was not meteoric. It was earned, voyage by voyage, on the strength of trust and time. As Edward Smith's reputation grew within the White Star Line, so did the caliber of ships placed under his command. By the early 1900s, he was entrusted with captaining some of the most celebrated liners in the company's fleet, vessels that symbolized not only technological advancement, but also the prestige of British transatlantic travel. Among his most notable commands was the RMS Majestic, which he captained for nearly a decade. Under Smith's steady leadership, the Majestic earned a reputation for smooth crossings and exceptional safety. His presence aboard reassured passengers, many of whom were wealthy business figures, diplomats, and socialites. Smith's calm demeanor, combined with his gentlemanly conduct, made him a favorite among elite travelers, someone who could bridge the gap between luxury and discipline. He was known to personally greet prominent passengers, walk the decks in full uniform, and offer quiet reassurances when seas turned rough. His officers respected his fairness, while passengers appreciated his presence. For Smith, the role of captain extended beyond charts and compasses. It was about trust. He understood that, for many, the voyage across the Atlantic was more than a journey. It was an experience shaped by the dignity and steadiness of those at the helm. Smith's command style was not dramatic or aggressive. He preferred order, routine, and quiet vigilance. It was this consistency, cultivated over decades, that made him the natural choice for White Star's most ambitious venture yet. He was not merely a ship's captain. He was the symbol of reliability in an era of speed, elegance, and transatlantic pride. By the time Edward Smith entered the early 20th century, he had achieved something few merchant captains could claim: the status of a national figure. Known across both sides of the Atlantic as the Millionaire's Captain, he was chosen time and again to command ships carrying some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful individuals. Yet his fame rested not on glamour or charm, but on consistency, calmness, and refined authority. Smith's reputation as a gentleman captain was well earned. He was courteous without being distant, firm without being cold. In a profession marked by long hours and unpredictable dangers, he stood out for his balance, dignified in appearance, yet approachable in manner. Passengers spoke of his reassuring presence during turbulent weather, while crew members admired his unshakable discipline and fairness. Beyond the White Star Line, Smith also held rank in the Royal Naval Reserve, a civilian military affiliation that demonstrated the British Admiralty's confidence in his abilities. He wore his R&R insignia with pride, and had even served aboard troopships during the Boer War, further enhancing his public image as both a mariner and a patriot. His naval uniform added to the authority he exuded on deck, bridging civilian luxury with military precision. By the time he was selected to command the new Olympic-class ships, Smith was at the height of his career. To the British public and international press, he was not just a captain, he was a symbol of trust at sea. His presence aboard any vessel signaled safety, success, and stately professionalism. And for the White Star Line, he was the only logical choice to helm their grandest ships yet. As transatlantic travel surged in the early 20th century, the White Star Line set out to redefine ocean luxury. Their answer came in the form of the Olympic-class liners, a trio of vast, elegant ships designed to compete with the fastest and finest vessels on the sea. These ships were not simply means of transport, they were floating palaces, blending industrial power with Edwardian grandeur. Edward Smith was the natural choice to command the first of these, the RMS Olympic. Launched in the year 1911, the Olympic was the largest ship in the world at the time, and its maiden voyage was a national event. Under Smith's guidance, the Olympic operated with precision and confidence, though not without challenges. A minor collision with HMS Hawke tested both the ship's strength and Smith's leadership, but the Olympic returned to service and retained its reputation for elegance and safety. In recognition of his steady command and long-standing service, Smith was appointed to helm the second ship in the class, the RMS Titanic. This new vessel promised to surpass even the Olympic in scale, luxury, and prestige. As captain of Titanic's maiden voyage, Smith was given what many considered a crowning honor to command the greatest ship ever built. For Smith, it was to be his final voyage before retirement. The world watched as Titanic prepared to sail. Newspapers praised its opulence, engineers admired its design, and passengers entrusted their lives to its famed captain. Edward Smith stood once more at the center of a maritime chapter, one destined to make history for reasons no one yet imagined. The RMS Titanic was conceived as the crown jewel of the White Star Line, a vessel so vast, luxurious, and advanced that it would eclipse all others. Constructed at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland, the Titanic was over 880 feet long and weighed more than 46,000 tons. With 9 decks, 29 boilers, and 4 towering smokestacks, it was hailed as the pinnacle of modern engineering. Her interiors rivaled the finest hotels in Europe. The grand staircase, adorned with wrought iron and oak paneling, led to elegant dining saloons, reading rooms, Turkish baths, and even a squash court. First-class accommodations featured private promenades and gilded suites, while second- and third-class spaces were designed with more comfort than many other liners of the era. The Titanic symbolized a new era of ocean travel, where speed, safety, and sophistication coexisted. The public response was electric. Newspapers across Britain, Europe, and America heralded the ship as unsinkable, owing to its state-of-the-art watertight compartments and reinforced hull. Tickets for its maiden voyage sold quickly, and the passenger list included aristocrats, business magnates, and immigrants chasing new lives across the Atlantic. The ship embodied both technological triumph and imperial pride. For Edward Smith, it was a familiar yet elevated assignment. He had guided great ships before, but none with such global attention. Titanic was more than a vessel, it was a statement to the world. And as it prepared to depart Southampton, the excitement was undeniable. All eyes were on the ship, its passengers, and the man at the helm. On the 10th of April in the year 1912, the RMS Titanic set sail from Southampton on her maiden voyage to New York. The atmosphere at the docks was one of fanfare and pride. Crowds gathered to witness the departure of the largest ship in the world, while porters and stewards bustled across the decks, preparing for a journey that was expected to redefine transatlantic travel. Captain Edward Smith stood on the bridge in full uniform, a reassuring presence to both the crew and passengers. Among the over 2,000 people aboard were some of the most recognizable names of the era: industrialists like John Jacob Astor, fashion designer Lady Duff Gordon, and Isidore Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store. Alongside them were hundreds of immigrants traveling in third class, many with dreams of new beginnings in America. Life aboard the Titanic quickly settled into routine. First-class passengers dined in opulent salons, strolled on teak decks, and enjoyed live music from professional ensembles. Second-class travelers had access to a library, a smoking room, and well-appointed cabins. Even third-class accommodations were considered superior to what most liners offered. Captain Smith was frequently seen walking the decks and chatting with passengers, a familiar habit that endeared him to travelers who valued his steady presence. The weather was calm and spirits were high. From the outside, the voyage was unfolding exactly as planned, luxurious, smooth, and splendid. But deep within the North Atlantic, ice fields lay ahead, and within days, this serene journey would become the most infamous voyage in maritime history. As the Titanic pressed into the North Atlantic, the weather remained deceptively calm. By the 12th of April, reports from other ships began arriving via wireless telegraph, warning of icebergs and drifting ice fields along the Titanic's intended route. These messages were received by the Marconi operators on board, Harold Bride and Jack Phillips, who were also busy handling personal messages from passengers. Several of the ice warnings were forwarded to the bridge and logged. Captain Edward Smith reviewed them, as did his officers, and slight course adjustments were made. However, there was no full diversion or significant slowdown. The skies were clear, the sea unusually flat, and many aboard considered the voyage to be unfolding smoothly. Some historians believe that this calm sea may have made icebergs harder to spot, as there were no breaking waves to mark their outlines. On Sunday, the 14th of April, Titanic received at least 6 warnings of ice. The final and most urgent message came that evening from the SS Californian, reporting a large ice field directly ahead. However, due to the backlog of passenger messages and radio interference, that last warning never reached the bridge. Captain Smith was known for his trust in experienced officers and routine decision-making. That night, he dined with guests in the first-class saloon, confident in the ship's strength and capability. Yet as darkness fell, the Titanic surged ahead at near full speed, unaware that its destiny loomed just beyond the horizon. The most critical hours of Smith's long career were about to begin, shaped by choices, delays, and the hidden dangers of the icy Atlantic. At approximately 11:40 on the night of the 14th of April, in the year 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the icy North Atlantic. The collision occurred on the starboard side, scraping and tearing through several compartments below the waterline. Most passengers felt only a faint jolt, a strange vibration, more unsettling in its subtlety than in force. But down below, seawater began pouring in at an alarming rate. Captain Edward Smith was summoned to the bridge within minutes. After assessing the damage with Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, he received the chilling verdict: Titanic could not stay afloat. The ship's watertight bulkheads, though advanced for the time, were not high enough to prevent water from spilling from one compartment into the next. The unthinkable had become reality. Smith immediately ordered lifeboats uncovered and began organizing evacuation. But the ship carried only enough boats for about half the people aboard, a decision rooted in outdated maritime regulations. Despite the calm demeanor he maintained, Smith understood the scale of the unfolding disaster. Officers were instructed to prioritize women and children, and wireless operators began sending distress calls into the night. The first lifeboats were launched, many only partially filled. Passengers were reluctant to believe the ship was in danger, and the crew, caught off guard, struggled to enforce order. Through it all, Captain Smith remained on the bridge and deck, offering calm commands and quiet support. He was no longer the millionaire's captain. He was now the man standing between chaos and dignity, fighting a race against time that no seamanship could win. As the bitter cold of the North Atlantic gripped the decks of the Titanic, Captain Edward Smith faced the gravest hours of his life. With the ship slowly sinking and panic rising, he moved between officers, lifeboats, and stairwells, steady in voice, direct in tone, and deeply aware of what was at stake. His orders were clear: women and children first, lifeboats lowered with urgency, and wireless signals sent continuously into the night. There were only 20 lifeboats, far too few for the more than 2,000 people aboard. Smith did not panic. He directed the crew to load and launch quickly, even as confusion and disbelief swept through the decks. He was seen helping women into boats, issuing commands to lower away, and urging passengers to trust the crew's instructions. Despite earlier underfilled boats, he began to insist on fuller loads as the situation became clearer. Witnesses recalled Smith walking the deck in full uniform, his voice rising above the noise. "Be British," he reportedly told the crew, invoking calm and duty. He moved between the bridge and the boat deck, checking on progress, guiding both officers and passengers with calm determination. By 2 in the morning, only a few lifeboats remained. Smith was offered a place in one but refused. His ship was doomed, and he would not abandon it. As the last boats pulled away and the deck tilted beneath his feet, Edward Smith continued to do what he had always done: lead with resolve, and place others before himself. It was a captain's final watch, marked not by survival, but by courage and quiet sacrifice. As the Titanic's final minutes unfolded, Captain Edward Smith remained a steady presence amid chaos. With the ship's bow dipping lower into the sea, passengers and crew scrambled to find safety. The air was filled with cries, collapsing deck chairs, and the rising roar of water filling the lower decks. Through it all, witnesses reported glimpses of Smith, not hiding or fleeing, but walking with composure through the confusion. Several accounts placed him near the bridge, speaking calmly with officers or offering encouragement to the remaining passengers. Steward Edward Brown remembered seeing Smith ordering crewmen to help women and children, saying firmly, "Do your duty, boys." Others recalled him handing out life jackets, even directing people toward the remaining collapsible boats, the last desperate options for survival. Some reported seeing him dive into the sea as the bridge was engulfed, while others believed he returned to the wheelhouse, choosing to go down with his ship in silence. No one can say for certain what his final seconds looked like. The water was freezing, the night pitch dark, and the Titanic gone by 2:20 in the morning. Edward Smith's body was never recovered, but the legacy of his final moments of dignity, command, and personal sacrifice became one of the most poignant human images tied to the Titanic tragedy. For those who survived, the memory of his calm voice and steady bearing left a deep impression. In the end, he fulfilled the unwritten code of the sea, a captain who stayed and stood to the last. In the days following the Titanic's sinking, news of the tragedy spread rapidly across the globe. Newspapers from London to New York ran bold headlines, not just reporting the disaster, but placing Captain Edward Smith at the heart of the unfolding story. To many, he became the symbol of both the ship's grandeur and its fall, the man who had commanded with honor until the very end. Public reaction was swift and deeply emotional. In Britain, Smith was mourned as a national figure. Memorial services were held in Southampton, his longtime home, and in other port cities touched by the disaster. Maritime unions and naval officers praised his conduct, calling him a credit to the merchant navy. For many grieving families, his reported bravery offered a small measure of solace amid overwhelming loss. The American and British inquiries that followed painted differing portraits. Some questioned the ship's speed, Smith's failure to heed ice warnings, and the lack of lifeboat drills. Others defended his experience and emphasized the broader failings of maritime regulations at the time. The debate over his decisions and the role of the White Star Line stirred controversy, but also highlighted the pressure he had faced in commanding the world's most celebrated vessel. While not without criticism, the enduring image of Edward Smith in the public imagination was one of dignity and sacrifice. His name became inseparable from the Titanic, and whether seen as a hero or a tragic figure, he remained central to the story, a captain whose final voyage reshaped maritime history forever. In the years following the Titanic disaster, the legacy of Captain Edward Smith evolved into a powerful blend of admiration, symbolism, and ongoing debate. His name became immortalized alongside the ship he commanded, etched into maritime history as the man who stood firm while the world's greatest liner slipped beneath the sea. Across Britain and beyond, tributes poured in to honor his service, sacrifice, and quiet valor. Statues and plaques were erected in his memory, including a prominent memorial in Lichfield, Staffordshire, featuring a bronze bust and poetic tribute. His image became iconic, the dignified captain in full uniform, representing the nobility of duty in the face of disaster. Sailors and civilians alike held him as a standard of bravery, the embodiment of what it meant to lead with courage until the end. Yet his legacy was not without controversy. Some critics questioned his decisions, particularly his failure to slow the ship despite multiple iceberg warnings and the lack of urgent lifeboat preparations. Others argued he was following company expectations, shaped by the pressures of schedule, image, and the belief in Titanic's engineering strength. Historians continue to explore whether Smith was a victim of flawed systems or a participant in their failures. Still, even those who raise questions often acknowledge his conduct in the final hours. A man who remained on the bridge, encouraging calm and refusing safety for himself. Over a century later, Edward Smith remains one of the most discussed figures in maritime lore. His life, his choices, and his quiet final moments continue to echo through history, shaped by honor, scrutiny, and the endless human need to understand tragedy. Captain Edward Smith met his end in the early morning hours of the 15th of April in the year 1912, as the Titanic vanished beneath the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. His body was never recovered, and his final moments remain unconfirmed. Some said he returned to the bridge. Others believed he was last seen helping others into lifeboats. The truth was lost in the darkness. Without a grave, his memory was honored through monuments across Britain in Lichfield, Hanley, and Southampton, each carved with words of courage and duty. He came to represent not just the Titanic's fate, but the ideal of steadfast leadership in crisis. Smith's death also spurred change. Investigations following the disaster helped bring new safety standards to life, including increased lifeboat requirements, improved wireless procedures, and the formation of the International Ice Patrol. Though mistakes were debated, his composed presence during the sinking was widely respected. More than a century later, Edward Smith's name remains deeply tied to the Titanic. He is remembered not simply as a captain of a doomed ship, but as a man who faced catastrophe with calm resolve. His legacy lives on in maritime law, historical memory, and the enduring question of what it means to lead in moments of greatest peril. What do you think about Isambard Kingdom Brunel? Was Brunel a fearless visionary, a man who transformed the modern world with steam, steel, and unshakable ambition? Or was he a restless soul, burdened by the weight of innovation, whose relentless pace outpaced even his own health and peace? And what about Captain Edward Smith? Was Smith the embodiment of maritime honor, a calm, commanding presence who met his fate with dignity and devotion to duty? Or was he a tragic figure, caught in the machinery of empire and expectation, remembered more for a single night than a lifetime at sea? Were these men pioneers of progress, or prisoners of the very greatness they helped build? Did their strength shape the age of iron and steam, or were they swept away by the very forces they mastered? We would love to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales from the past, stories of courage, choice, and the quiet force behind history. Thank you so much for watching.